Hi, my name is the Reverend Dr. Lynda Reid, and I am both a minister of Word and Sacrament and a member of the Order of Diaconal Ministries with the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. When I was a teenager, I was struggling with what I would do after I left high school. And throughout my high school years, I had been involved with the church, and I had a desire to serve the church. But I wasn't sure what I could do. The only thing I really knew I could do was be an overseas missionary. Well, I spoke with the minister of our church at the time, and he suggested that there were many things that women within our church could do, but we could not be ministers of Word and Sacrament. He suggested that I go to York College, which was our church's college for Christian education and for training deaconesses. It was a big decision for me to make because I was going to be leaving small town Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan and coming to Toronto. It was about 1,500 miles away as well, and I was leaving a family. But I went to York College because my mother said, well, 1 year at York College won't hurt you. At that time, York College was beginning to focus on Christian education for congregations and for area work such as presbyteries and synods within our church. They also had some courses which related to other forms of deaconesses and diaconal ministry in social services and overseas missionaries, but its focus was Christian education. And so that's where my ministry ended up focusing. Throughout my over 40 years of ministry, active ministry, my main focus for diaconal ministry was leadership development of the lay people within our church. I worked with children's groups and with women's groups. With children's groups, I trained church school teachers for Sunday schools. I have worked with a single congregation as a deaconess, and I worked within a couple of geographic areas. My first ministry was with a presbytery with about 30 churches, and my last ministry was with a synod with over 300 churches. During that time of working, I also decided to take courses to qualify for a minister of Word and Sacraments. And I found that that expanded my ministry focus. I was able to approach ministry of Word and Sacraments with a diaconal heart. I think that's what I would call it. In my retirement now, I'm able to still prepare and lead worship with congregations, and that includes the celebration of Holy Communion. And that's a gift to be able to do that. One of the Bible stories that has guided my diaconal ministry is Jesus welcoming the children. I've always had a love of little children. Wanted to be a teacher, a kindergarten teacher when I was very young. That didn't work out. But Jesus welcomes the children. It's an important story in the Gospels, for it's found in Luke and Matthew and Mark as well. One child that I encountered in one of the children's programs had only read the stories of the Bible out of the King James Version of the Bible. A good version for its time, but it's divided into individual verses. As we read the story, we read it by the individual verses. And at the end of the story, I asked the children to tell me the story in their own words. And this 9-year-old said, "What story?" He did not see all those individual verses as a complete story of Jesus' ministry, of Jesus telling a parable, or Jesus healing somebody. That was a big insight for me, because how do you bring the Bible to life? The Bible is not just words and verses to be memorized. It's meant to be lived, experienced in our lives. Having God as part of our lives, an integral part of our lives. So that kind of story has guided my ministry to bring people to Jesus. One of the images of diaconal ministry, which has become important for me in my more recent ministry, like say of 20 years, is the towel and basin. I know it's used a lot in diaconal ministry, flyers and brochures and such. And maybe you think it's passé or everybody's using it. But it gives two purposes for me. First of all, the serving aspect, serving one another. At one celebration on Maundy Thursday, we introduced hand washing to a congregation. And I remember very vividly this husband and wife who were washing each other's hands. She was quite a small woman. He was a tall, strapping, over 6 feet a man with big hands. And she very gently washed his hands. And the love between the two of them just shone there. Such a symbol of serving one another. I also see the towel and basin and the serving of one another as you do it without a lot of fanfare. I believe servants should be seen and not heard, was that old adage. And diaconal ministry is a little bit like that, serving in the background. I remember in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s particularly, our order was going through a very difficult time of wondering what was our future. And we had one woman speak to us at a meeting, and she was a Roman Catholic nun who had decided to leave her order and be married. And she said, sometimes it's better to be on the outside of the politics, the outside of the structure, because you can do things and they don't even know that it's happening, but you've changed things. And I truly believe that our order changed. Many of the ways that our ministers of Word and Sacrament now do ministry within their churches. Because of the Order of Diaconal Ministries, the Presbyterian Church in Canada now ordains people to ministries other than just congregational. One of the ways we did that is that as many of us became ministers of Word and Sacraments, we chose other forms of ministry to be active in, such as my synod education consultant role. I was ordained to that. It wasn't a congregation. I was ordained to the role of that education consultant. And I think that was a real gift that our order gave to the church. I like the flexibility of the ministries that diaconal ministers can carry out, because they are listening to the call of God and not just the whims of the church or society. The Holy Spirit is our guide.